every trick in the book. I'll try my best to get you hooked. I'm gonna use every trick in the book. I'll try my best to get you.
A quick introduction for describing my side. My face is forgettable, a regular guy. Now I can be anyone, anywhere I aim. I just need the mindset, a story and a name. Just started working here, haven't got my badge yet. My hard hat and clipboard's the same as all access. Data center rooftop, finished with my case soon. Taking people's lunches from the bags up in the break room. Talking through my story, recited it with confidence. Make you feel at ease, disregard your common sense. Now I'm in, hope you're ready for the consequence. Cause I'm picking locks, slipping off with all your documents. Play the subconsciousness.
Welcome to the socialengineer.org podcast number 15.
Number 15.
Thank you. Oh, man. I guess this episode is brought to you by the USDA Beef Organization. With all the mooing in the back. We have our panel with us. I don't even know who to introduce first. Maddie, what's going on? Oh, boy. Great. So also we got some sheep. Jim, how are you doing?
I'm pretty good. How are you doing, Chris?
Oh, I'm just fine and dandy today. And how about you, Dave? How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
You know, we missed that last month because you were too busy on a windy golf course wrecking our podcast. So
I apologize.
Thanks for bringing that back. We appreciate it.
I'm in a normal place this time.
That's amazing. That's like the first, isn't it?
I think it's like the second.
Okay. So let's see. We got a bunch of stuff in the SE world going on. Dave, can I talk a little bit about that screenshot you sent me the other day?
Sure, absolutely. Go for it.
The new web interface for SET. When are we going to see that in the real world?
I'm hoping that it'll be released in less than a month. So version 0.8 should be released in a month. I'm doing some major coding with it, and I've actually spent about 5 days coding DLLs and a bunch of other stuff. So it's going to be a great release.
Yeah, we should leak that picture. It is a beautiful interface for this. It's going to make it really nice to have that as a tool. Are there any other major additions or updates coming out with 0.8?
So there's a new function which is the set automate, which you can basically, I don't know if you know with Meterpreter, you can do the -r flag, which allows you to do an answer file. You can do the same thing with set now. So basically you call a new tool called set automate, and it automates the creation of everything for you in set over a file. So basically you just have a file with all the answers in it, and then it'll create a set for you. So you don't have to go through the menus every single time.
Awesome.
That's a good one. And then the DLL hijacking attack is a new one that it'll go through spear phishing. So the spear phishing attack, you can utilize the DLL hijacking method, and that's what I've been working on, writing the DLL from scratch. So that'll be good.
That's phenomenal.
There's a million other things going in there too.
I look forward to seeing that. All I got was the screenshot of the web interface, which I'm really looking forward to seeing that too. So yeah, great. Look forward to that. Another couple weeks maybe, or three or 4 weeks. You're saying, and then we'll get to see that.
Yep, that's the plan.
Awesome. Let's see what else is going on. Last month, Jim and I were tweeting a little bit about submissions. We had a lot of people asking how they can get stuff on the website or in the newsletter. So we had sent out a tweet asking people to submit items for either the newsletter or blog post, and we didn't know what we were going to get, but the response was a little bit overwhelming. We got a lot of people submitting different articles or ideas for articles or some of their work and research that they did. One we just posted as a blog post about how to make your own eavesdropping tool. This guy did a neat little thing. He took like an APC multi-plug with power adapter thing, and he dug out the area where you would plug in phone jacks, and inside of that small section, he dismantled a baby monitor and planted the sound pickup, and he was able to put it inside of this device, and then it was powered through actually having the thing plugged in, so you have to worry about battery power or anything like that. And he was able to pick up sound, maybe 50, 70 feet away, but he used it at a contest, like a CTF kind of contest where he was at, and they were allowed to use social engineering and physical intrusion and things like that in the contest. So he did a nice write-up. We have that on the blog, on the social-engineer.org website. So you can take a look at that. That was really good. And last month, Joe, our guest Joe Navarro, he hooked us up with a guy who was an FBI agent, does profiling, behavioral profiling, and he writes a lot about social engineering. So he's developing some articles. We're going to see some more submissions from him, maybe in the newsletter and the blog post, as well as some other things that have been sent to us. So we'll be reviewing all that and getting it on there. So thank you for sending in those submissions, and keep sending them in, because we really appreciate that, and it helps with adding some new content to the site. So if you want to contribute anything, just send it to contribute@social-engineer.org, and we'll be able to get right to that. Let's see, what else we got? Our sponsors, as always, Offensive Security. You can check them out at www.offensive-security.com. You want to say anything about that, Mutz? Okay, excellent. People will be.
I'm sorry, you're catching me. You're catching me off guard. So my natural instinct is just to answer you with the bleep. You know what I mean? If you give me some more time to think about it, I might actually have something intelligent to say.
Okay, so anytime we catch you off guard, you're just gonna bleat like a sheep?
Natural instinct.
Okay. I don't want to ask why. That's a natural instinct, so we're just going to skip that and move on to our next sponsor, which I was almost afraid to ask Jim to say anything. Continuum Worldwide. You can check them out at www.continuumww.com. Of course, the EFF, they continually support us nonstop with any type of legal matters or questions that we have to make sure we're staying on the right path. And Spy Associates, always sending us some neat and cool gear that we can test out and then share with you and the rest of the world on what's going on out there. Now, before I bring up Dual Core, we gotta correct something. Oh man, that guy's awesome, isn't he? And
yeah.
You know, again, I got to get him on the podcast so we can have this little, We Love Relic session. But that's not what this is about. That's not what this is about. I just did it again. The thing that I'm about to correct, I did it again. We had a guy come in the channel, and now all of us know this, that Dual Core is the name of the band. That the dude's name, and what he calls himself, is Int80, and then his partner is C64. So every time I say Dual Core, I say he. And some guy came in the channel, and he's like, you guys know in the podcast that Dual Core is two people, right? And I'm like, yeah, of course we know. And he's like, well, every time on the last few podcasts you talk about Dual Core, you say he. So we're officially correcting this. If you're listening, we know that Dual Core is two people. We just say he because it's easier, I guess. But
because we're lazy.
We're lazy. We're lazy. We're verbally lazy. But in the end of it, we are really appreciative for the new intro and outro music from the band Dual Core. And if you like what you hear there, which a lot of people do, we're getting a lot of feedback on Twitter and an email, people saying they love the stuff, and a couple guys were in the channel, never heard of Dual Core, and now I guess went and bought his albums. So we're happy to hear that it's having the desired impact for him and his band. But if you want to check him out, dualcoremusic.com is the website to get more music like what you hear on the intro and outro. That song that he wrote for us is called Trust Me. And he released that on the site actually for free, so you can download a couple tracks for free there and get a taste of what he's like. What else we got going? Anything else we need to bring up before we move into the topic for today?
What is the topic for today?
Topic for today is deception. Now, this is an interesting, not just deception in general. This is a really interesting flip on the topic. There's a group of researchers. They actually label themselves social robotics researchers. And what they do is they've researched things like trust, some of their papers involving trust, but some of their most recent research is deception. And these guys feel that they have figured out the algorithms that occur inside of a person to create deceptive behavior. Then once they figured out those algorithms, they mathematized them and were able to build them into robotics to prove that they have, figured out these algorithms for deception, and we're able to run a test, which they have this research paper online that shows this. I think it was like 75 or 80% of their trials were successful in robots being able to exhibit deceptive behavior. So we thought we'd have this guy on to talk about deception, of course, and how they were able to create these algorithms, figure out what it is, and that might help us to understand from a human standpoint how deception is created inside of us. And once we can analyze that, maybe see how we can use that as social engineers.
Sounds fascinating. I wonder what type of research they did and how they implemented it.
Yeah, that's some of the stuff I think he's going to talk to us about. So, was that Dave?
Yeah, I heard they actually implanted a human brain into the machine.
What?
Is that right?
No.
That's not right?
This doesn't have any involvement with Skynet, right?
No, I was thinking RoboCop.
Yeah. Oh, great.
Murphy? No, that's hackers. What's the dude's name from RoboCop?
I don't know.
Murphy.
Murphy, that's
Yeah.
it.
Wow.
Wow.
Good one.
You know, you can't even remember my name half the time. How do you remember that?
You are who?
Oh, yeah, you see? See?
You have to remember the important things in life.
Oh, man.
What's this one that came out with Murphy?
Yeah, Mutz. Mutz did it. I know.
I'm impressed.
Yeah. So, if you're done with that, I'll give you a brief introduction, and then we'll get our guest on here, who is Alan Wagner. He's a doctor of computer science. Got a PhD from Georgia Tech and a BS from Boston University in computer science, as well as a degree in psychology. So I'm sure we're going to have some interesting conversation with him as he comes on to the podcast in a few minutes. Okay, so we have our guest with us, Alan Wagner. He's a doctor of computer science, has a PhD from Georgia Tech, as well as an MS degree from Boston University in computer science, and a degree, psychology degree from Northwestern University. So, Alan, I'd like to say thank you for coming on the show today to be with us. We appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. We introed a little bit, talked about some of your research before you came on, but I just was curious maybe if you can give us some background into your research from your angle, some of the things that you've done that led you up to the research about deception.
Sure. For my PhD thesis, I was working on a computational framework originally developed in social psychology that would allow robots to better interact with people. One of the challenges for a robot interacting with a person is that the robot needs to have some understanding of individuals. Not only does it need to model them as individuals that are unique in the world, but it also has to have some underlying groundwork. And from that, I took interdependence theory, which is a social psychological, but also computational framework for representing people and the way they interact with one another and their actions with each other, and developed that into a series of algorithms which could be implemented on a robot. And one of the first interest areas that I wanted to use this framework on was trust. So wanted to explore whether or not a robot could determine who was the most trusted partner among a group and whether or not someone was trusting it or whether it should trust someone else. As an offshoot of that, my advisor and I, through a conversation we wanted to explore deception, and specifically we wanted to explore whether or not deception was sort of a dual of trust. Was it sort of the mirror image of trust in a way? Personally, I'm not sure if that's a good characterization of deception as the dual of trust. There might be some validity to the argument, but we've ended up coming up with a lot of interesting results just exploring deception on artificial systems in themselves. For example, we were able to develop a computational algorithm which could be used by the robot to determine whether or not deception was warranted in a social situation. And we started from a definition of deception that grew from biology. Biologists have studied deception for a long time. The whole area of theory of mind, theory of mind is the idea that an individual will have a model of someone else's thoughts, beliefs, and emotions, and that theory of mind is used to guide their social behavior. So we explored areas from biology. We took a definition from biologists for deception, which basically was very simple and could be implemented in a interdependence framework. And the definition of deception was just that a deception is a false communication that tends to benefit the communicator. And so we could implement that on this social psychological framework, and based on those properties, namely that deception required something called interdependence, which means that the deceiver is depending upon the mark or the person being deceived for their reward. And reward here can mean anything. It could mean money. It could mean information. It could mean whatever they're after. But the deceiver depends on the mark. That's the first condition for deception. And the second condition is that they're in conflict. And what this conflict means is that whatever is good for the deceiver is not good for the mark, and vice versa. So whatever is good for the mark is also not good for the deceiver.
I have a question on that one.
Sure.
Excuse me. When you say that it cannot be good for the mark, what about a situation where you deceive someone into doing something good for them?
Right. That's a good example. So, for example, let's say deceiving someone to take their medicine, right?
Correct, yeah.
So in that case, the immediate social situation is one of conflict. But the longer range social situation, the situation over a series of steps, is one which is ultimately beneficial for the individual. So you have conflict in the short-term period, and you have non-conflict in the longer term.
So are you saying that conflict in the initial stage is what makes it still fit the algorithm for deception? Exactly.
The short-term conflict fits the algorithm for deception, also produces a situation in which deception is warranted. And ultimately it's for the better of the person, but it's that short-term period that does it. So, okay, so in the beginning you brought out how you were trying to develop algorithms for both trust and deception, and then you went in and you described it. Now that description, is that the algorithm? Or is that description is the description I gave is one of the algorithms we produced, and the algorithm determines whether or not deception is warranted or justified. So in order for a robot to use deception, it's got to know, is this a social situation in which deception is warranted? Otherwise, you could have any of a variety of cases. You could have a robot that never uses deception. You could have a robot that often uses deception, or randomly uses deception, even worse. Now, because you wanted the robot to be able to interact with a human, I'm assuming you had to analyze and then make algorithms for human behavior first, right? Would that be a correct assumption? Well, we took a very gentler approach. So the algorithms we developed are not specific just to robots. They could be used by artificial agents. They could be used by poker bots. They could be used by humans talking about other people. So the computational approach we took is not just limited to robots. So, I mean, when you say the first part of the algorithm is determining if deception is warranted, can you explain that a little bit deeper or a little bit more? Sure. So, basically, the first step of an interaction, right? You perceive things. Maybe I've never used this example before, so I don't know how it'll go, but let's try it. Let's say a poker bot, something that's online, has limited perception, but enough perception, and it's interacting with other poker players through, its actions in a poker game. Okay? So it has a couple of different actions. It can do different things. It might recognize that this is a situation for deception because, first of all, its reward in terms of money is dependent upon the actions of the other individuals in the game. And also, it is in conflict with them. So if it gains money, then someone else is losing money.
Okay.
So the conditions for deception are met in that case.
Right, that makes sense.
Now let's consider something that's a cooperative game.
Cooperative? You mean something like maybe like a team on a basketball or?
Oh yeah, okay, teammates on basketball. That's perfect. So in this case, you are dependent on your other teammates, so dependent condition may be met, but you're not in conflict with them. If a teammate makes a basket, it's good for you too.
Right.
So
okay, and you might
no
actually then, as a team, utilize deception against the other team.
Right, because there's conflict between you and the other team. Your points are inversely proportional to their scores.
Okay, so I want to break that down. I'm sorry, go ahead, Matty.
Sorry. What parameters are you taking into account when you evaluate deception or a state to start deception? How are you interfacing with humans? Are we talking about video? Are we talking about text? How is the analysis done? What are you evaluating essentially?
Oh, that's kind of a big question.
Leave it to Matty to come up with the big one.
So what have we evaluated in the studies themselves? Well, we took a sort of pared down simplistic paradigms where you basically had a limited action set, limited perceptual bandwidth. There are only so many things, so many ways that the human or that the other robot could interact with the original robot. But things could easily scale up where you have a large action set or you have an almost unlimited perceptual bandwidth of the individual. In human-to-human interaction, you have some of the largest that I can conceive of bandwidth interactions where, people are not just witnessing what you say or how you say it. They're also witnessing things like your body posture, your hand movements, whether you're sweating, things like that. But the principles for deception are still the same.
Were those things factored into your algorithms for deception, the things like body posture, facial expressions, that kind of stuff? They
don't. Our algorithm doesn't really need them because it sort of begins at a different point.
Okay.
We assume that the individual can model the situation. And once you can create a representation or the model of the situation, then you have all the information you need to determine whether or not you're deceiving. And so all that stuff like sweating, nervousness, all that would be included in the step where you're modeling the situation.
Okay, excellent. So you brought out that the first step was to determine if deception is warranted. So this is the first part of the algorithm. Now, of course, let's assume yes. The answer is yes. So then what's the next step in that algorithm? What's the next piece of that?
Right. Then the next piece, well, we didn't study, we really only explored the deception side. So what do you do if you're the deceiver?
Yes.
Yeah, it's very interesting side too. So the next step was that we assume that you have an action set, and what you want to do is you want to find out what action that is available to the person you're trying to deceive or the individual you're trying to deceive, which is the worst for you, for example. So taking the poker analogy, if a raise might be the worst for you since you're bluffing. So you don't want them to raise. A fold would be what's best for you. So the first step is to figure out which of their possible actions is worst for you, right? Then after that, what you want to do is you want to make up one of our basically matrices, which is a situation, a model of the situation, to determine which of your actions is most likely to make them pick the action which is either best for you or least worst.
Uh-huh.
So
that makes sense.
Does it make sense? Okay, so you're going through their actions. You're looking for which one is worst for you. You put together the situation, and you reason from that which action of your deceptive actions you can pick that will make them most likely to pick the one which is best for you or least worst.
Yeah, this makes sense because, I mean, I'm thinking about this in a human standpoint, maybe from a social engineering point of view, that, you know, when you approach a situation and you are the deceiver, you are the social engineer, you want the outcome that's best for you, but you also have to determine if it doesn't go this way, what's the worst possible outcome. So what action do I need to take to cause that person to do the thing that I want them to do so it creates the atmosphere that I need in order to do my social engineering or my my breaching of the perimeter.
So some of the more interesting sort of social engineering things that kind of came out of this were that there are two really difficult steps in the algorithm, and the one is that you have to calculate, you know, how your action is going to affect them. That's a really hard part for deception. You have to reason about, you know, if I bluff, if I say this in a poker game, what will it make them believe about my hand? From a social engineering standpoint, right, you have to come up with the right questions on the phone to ask them in order to get them to trust you or to get them to give whatever information they have.
How the heck do you possibly make that into an algorithm or an equation? I mean, that piece alone, just thinking about it from a, like you said, a very simplistic, I'm going to call you and I want you to say yes to my request, but there's 10 possible answers you can give to every question. I need to calculate how my action will affect you.
Yeah. That part's very hard. But
yeah.
So there are different. We've developed techniques for dealing with that, and the first one, right, is to assume that it revolves around having a model of the person you're trying to deceive. And one of the things we found is the more accurate model you have of the individual you're trying to deceive, the better you can answer that question. So for these robots, one of the first things we did is we had them assume that the other robot was exactly like them. It had all the same information, it had learned all the same things, and then it used their own model of themselves to reason about how an action would be perceived by the other individual, which from a social psychological standpoint is usually a good first step that people do.
Right. So, I mean, from a security standpoint, a social engineer standpoint, to me this sounds like the basic step of information gathering. If you're my target, I'm going to gather as much information about you as possible on the web, on your social media accounts, friends. If I'm, trying to do research on you as a person, develop what your likes, dislikes are, your pet peeves, everything about you that I can. That will develop a model on paper, basically, of you, and that will give me usually a clearer path to determine what will work and what will not work on deceiving you.
That's great. I think that would be the second step. So the first step would be, let's say I don't know anything about any of that, and I just assume you're just like me, and then I pick the deceptive action, which would most fool me, and that works a lot of the times. But the second step is some research we're also doing where you create clusters of models of people. And those clusters represent stereotypes of people. And then you use a stereotype to predict how different actions will be viewed by members of that stereotype, by close individuals in that group, based on just raw, whatever sort of small data you might have.
So you actually have like matrices that will say, well, actually, before I assume this, let me ask you this. How do you stereotype? Is it based on age, gender, culture? What kind of...
It could be anything. I mean, it could be things that don't matter. It could be height. It could be how many times you pick your ear, number of hairs in your head, the location, the people around you, any kind of small perceptual nugget that can be used to build a larger model of that individual.
So you can have a stereotype that is like 6-foot-tall white guys from northeastern Pennsylvania will react to this question this way usually.
That would be a very specific one, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you could have that, right?
Wow. Okay.
And so, but you use learning algorithms to develop those stereotypes and those sort of generalized partner models. And then from that generalized partner model, you pick the right question to produce the deception.
Okay.
Does that all make sense?
It does, to me at least. It does. I think I'm catching this. So, so after you calculate how your action will affect the target, the person, or the device you're trying to deceive, what's the next step of that algorithm? Because what I have in there is either creating personal clusters of information for a particular person or creating more wide stereotype clusters of information.
Yeah. What you do next is, so let's say you figured out how the action will affect that model, and then the next thing you do is you calculate the resulting situation from the model and the action, so that you basically formulate what the matrix will be like to see how your actions will be impacted by their actions. And then basically you do it. You do it in the real world, see how it goes. You record that information and update your stereotype, and your action model can basically learn to deceive better, or this can also be, a lot of this can also be applied to trust. Pick the better trusting partner better in the future.
So then after you calculate your actions, I would assume the next step would be then you're going to perform that action.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. And then in your algorithm standpoint, you're obviously going to have then multiple different after the action what occurs. Will then be the next step in the deception. Right?
Yep.
If it's successful, everything's good. Win for the team. If it's not, then you either continue or run away.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. That's exactly right. Now, of course, in human deception, there's a lot of noise involved, and a lot of times things don't work. Maybe you pick maybe you pick an action and it doesn't work just because of randomness or whatnot. But humans also have thousands of models of different people that to base their decisions on, whereas robots and artificial agents, tend to have one or two at most, and those are sort of hand entered into the robot. So there's an economy of scale question here, which it's not clear, where the algorithm breaks, or does it break, or how far it can be pushed.
Right. Now, Matty, was that you? Did you come in?
Yeah, I just had a quick question. Could you give us perhaps a couple of examples, especially with the human action, where the machine won and how it happened?
Where the machine won?
Yes, where the machine won.
In
deceiving.
The experiments we ran were machine against machine, so we didn't do person to person. The experiment, and we ran the experiments that way, mostly because it's extremely difficult to get robots to perform actions. There's a lot of different reasons. One is it's tough to find a human population pool. Second, you run into ethical problems if you're going to deceive humans. The IRB, Internal Review Board, things like that. So it was, from a programmatic and getting the research out standpoint, it was just a lot easier to have robots deceive each other.
Well, we have some volunteers if you ever need humans to be I would be more than happy to volunteer to see if a robot can deceive me. This would be very interesting.
Well, I have access to humanoid now, so hopefully the deceptions can be a lot better and more involved.
Humanoid robotic?
Yeah, humanoid robot. So
really?
Yeah.
Oh man, that's going to be interesting.
I hope so.
Yeah. So in the research paper, because like Maddie's question, I'm curious about this too. In the research paper, I read that you had a robot trying to deceive another robot and how it was hiding or where it was going to hide.
Mm-hmm.
So what was the percentage of success in using the algorithm that you kind of outlined here, that it was able to deceive another robot into its hiding spot?
Well, let me explain the the experiment first, since in talking to some different media groups, there's been some confusion as to how the experiment was run and things like that. So let me explain it first so that your audience has an idea of how the experiment was run. The idea was to sort of generally represent a hide-and-go-seek paradigm, which is a fair model for deception. I mean, obviously, you're going to use deception in that sort of situation. And it's something that the kind of robots we were using, which was the smaller Rovio-type robots, which really can only navigate to different areas in a limited fashion, could easily do. And so we had 3 different locations. One was a left, center, and right location, which were each different hiding locations. Now, to begin with, the deceiver, also there were 3 markers set up of different color markers, and the robot could view the different markers and see which were standing and which were not. Sort of like a breadcrumb trail. When a robot went to one position, it would knock over 1 or 2 of the markers, depending on what the position was. So let's say if it was going to go to the right, it might knock over the red marker, and if it was going to go to the left, it might knock over the blue marker, and if it was going to go center, it would knock over, let's say, the green marker. Initially, what the robot did is it tested it out. It built a model of the situation. So it would try going to the right, and it would see which marker it knocked over. And it would try going to the left, and it would see which marker it knocked over in that case. And it built up a model of, if I go to these different locations, there's this probability that I'll knock over these markers. Now, because these are robots and because they're very noisy and things never go the way anyone expects, it wasn't always the case that if it was going to the right, it would knock over red. Sometimes it would knock over any, sometimes it would knock over all of them. So it was a noisy situation. But in any case, it still built a model. It was then presented with an artificial, induced situation where it needed to deceive another robot. And in that case, it randomly picked a direction. Let's say I'm going to hide to the left. And then it chose an action that it thought would make the other robot believe that it was in some other position. So it would intentionally go, let's say, to the right, knock over whatever markers it knocked over, and then go to the left. Independently, the other robot, the Mark, the one that it was trying to deceive, also built a model of the situation. So the 2 models of the situation were not the same, which are just like in people. If I'm trying to deceive you, you don't have all the same knowledge and beliefs that I have.
Right.
And it's not necessarily correct for me to assume that you do. But we wanted to capture that, incorrectness. So, we ran the experiment. The robots, the deceiver would go to different locations and knock over whatever markers it knocked over, and the Mark would view it using its own different model. And we found that 75% of the time, the algorithm worked.
So, okay, now understanding that, because that's, of course, from the robotic standpoint in helping, I can understand from your research and reading some of your website, your work is to create an environment where robots will be able to interact with humans more. So, but how does that help us to understand human deception on a deeper level? Like, how does this help us to understand maybe what's going on with people when they're trying to do this same kind of deceiving?
Well, from a fundamental standpoint, I think it helps us understand that, what causes deception. Well, again, that conflict and that interdependence. So if the Mark could recognize that, this is a situation where someone is dependent upon me for something, and also I believe I might be in conflict with that individual, then, from a human-to-human standpoint, you might be better suited for recognizing that deception may occur. From another sort of basic standpoint, our work has also shown that it really depends on how much information one individual has about another that helps deception occur, which is something that someone might not have necessarily said before. It seems obvious when you talk maybe human to human, but a lot of deception occurs, for example, grasshoppers using camouflage. A lot of, that is deception. Camouflaging, a grasshopper camouflaging itself is deceiving its prey. But the question then becomes, how is that information different from the information encoded in a human? And I've been in a lot of discussions with different people about that too. I mean, people build theories of mind, whereas grasshoppers do not. But it's really the information that's important. And information is not necessarily theory of mind. Information could just be something that's encoded in the grasshopper's case, is encoded in their genes and has been learned over years of hundreds and thousands of years of evolution.
I think, too, though, that even in a human standpoint, information is relative to perception. What information you receive, even about individuals. Let's say, you had a bad occurrence with a particular type of looking person. A tall blonde guy beat you up once, and now every time a tall blonde guy approaches you, your perception of that individual is different than maybe myself, who happens to be a tall blonde guy. So, the perception on information could be different just based on your life experiences. So,
but that's a good point. And humans have such richer models of types of individuals, of specific individuals, that it makes the deception that occurs in humans, in many ways different than what occurs on a grasshopper. But on a basic level, it still is deception.
Yeah, and I guess to me, like looking at this, trying to say, applying this to like a social engineer, all these steps make logical sense until we hit the third. This third, which we broke down into three parts. The calculate how your action will affect the target. To me, that step is very difficult to train someone how to do because, like you said, that's creating clusters of models, of stereotypes, and trying to realize that when these types of phrases are used or this type of body language is portrayed, then maybe deception is being portrayed. So if that is happening, your senses need to be heightened and you need to, so on and so forth. However that algorithm would go in like a, human English standpoint there. But that seems very difficult to do, to train someone to do that because, again, not that stereotype might fit, let's say maybe 50% of the time or 70% of the time, like in some of the statistics you mentioned, but it's not 100%. Is there a way to get closer?
Well, yeah, I would say one way to possibly do that is to, believe it or not, build stereotypes of people that are trying to deceive. There very likely is a common patterns of behavior, common patterns of speech and mannerisms that people are probably trainable to detect. I mean, you can imagine sort of the stereotypical used car salesman, right? These are people who are very glib. They're very I don't know how to say it other than the stereotype of a used car salesman.
Yeah, no, I understand.
If people could be trained to recognize that sort of pattern of behavior and to recognize that, then that would be one way to help people, not be engineered. Another way is to limit the amount or actually change or give out false information about oneself. So if you, again, looking at poker players, some good poker players that are very mathematical, they change their appearance and they dress in ways that would present them as more of a rock star type. And this probably works very well to sort of set up the wrong stereotype for that person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. It does.
So, for example, if someone calls someone up on a telephone, and maybe they sound like the dumb secretary who doesn't know anything and just babbling. The deceiver is going to use that information about that person to shape their behavior to get the information they want. So if it's possible to train the person to sound differently on the phone so that they get the deceiver to have the wrong stereotype in their head, they're probably much less likely to be socially engineered.
So, okay, so this is an interesting point. So your suggestion is not so much trying to train people how to recognize deception, but to train them to do their jobs in less stereotypical ways so the deceivers don't say, hey, I got this one because this is an easy person I've dealt with before. Right.
You just want to make sure that the deceiver can't develop a good model of the person they're trying to deceive.
Because the deceivers are like the con men, the scam artists, ID thieves. They're looking for a particular type of person that they know might be an easier mark than let's say another type of person.
Absolutely, and they're going to use all the information they can get, whether it's over the telephone, on the internet, person to person, to use that to develop the best stereotype that will get them the best action to produce the best deception. So, for example, if you're going to go buy a car from a used car salesman, and you're very rich, maybe you want to dress in a very slobby manner so that they don't have the right stereotype on you.
Huh. That is an interesting concept. Now, from a business standpoint, of course, like you're saying, a lot of times what could be difficult about that is personality traits. I know from professional social engineering, companies will hire people like the four of us, to actually imitate the malicious attacks of bad guys, but with different intent. Our goal is to find the weakness and then help them fix it. Mm-hmm. So in having to study these things and use these things in a business standpoint, a lot of times these are personality traits. People are this way every day in their life. They're this way in normal everyday circumstances. So it's not something that they just do at work. This is the way they are, and when they are that way, their risk is at work, at home, at their families, everywhere. They run the risk of being a victim of these things because of their personality. So your suggestion is very interesting, but it would mean also in educating people in a very profound way to change something that it might be even deep-seated within them, so they can be more difficult to victimize.
And a very hard thing for people to do too. I mean, some people that are trained actors maybe can do this all the time, but for example, for me, I'm an academic, and it's hard for me not to be an academic. So. Right. I mean, I can imagine it would be very hard for people to do that. That's the deceiver's bread and butter there. So if you have people in sensitive positions, maybe they should be the people that spend the most time pursuing this type of education.
And then do you think that from a robotic standpoint that you can actually algorithm that's probably, I'm using that as a verb now, that out to create almost like a deception on the mark's point?
So, could we make a mark that is, deceptive in its dealings with the deceiver, essentially, right? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I mean, in essence, if you're saying, like now a mark, either from a robotic or a human standpoint, says, hey, I think this guy's a deceiver, so I'm going to put on my own deceptive traits.
Yeah, in fact,
so
that was
the deceiver.
That was sort of, if this research keeps going, that's probably one of the first things that we're going to do was to have the mark basically try to fuzzify its actions or the deceiver's ability to mark or to model it, and to see how that affects its ability to deceive. But the algorithm makes it pretty clear that it would have a significant impact. Now, the question might be, is it sort of linear? Is it exponential? If you add just a little bit of noise to the deceiver's knowledge, does deception completely fall apart, or is it robust? That might be a situation-dependent kind of thing, but it's all pretty much unknown at this point.
So, with everything that you learned through this research, I guess the biggest question that comes to my mind on this is, what surprised you the most? What did not live up to the expectations that you originally had?
Well, this work in general, this deception work, was, believe it or not, I mean, among the hardest of the work that I've done. Trust, for some reason, seemed a lot easier to model, a lot easier to implement, a lot easier to use. first of all, we didn't know if it could even be implemented in the framework that I was talking about. Originally, the framework wasn't developed for deception at all. In fact, the fact that deception could be used within this framework, I think, says a lot that this framework is indeed general, which is something I was claiming the whole time. But so that was what was probably the most surprising, that it worked and that it worked so well. What was hardest and what sort of had the most difficult expectations was the way the algorithm turned out. And some of the points, and some academics have pointed this out, that some of the lines in the algorithm sum up some very difficult things to achieve in human-human interactions and human-robot interactions and whatever. And those are basically the lines that we talked about, the idea that if I select this action, how will it affect you? That's one line of this algorithm, but it can conceivably consume thousands of lines of code. So that was something that sort of maybe needs more work, more exploration, more deeper exploration.
So now that you've done deception, and are you going to continue to improve it, or are you looking at something else? Are you expanding on other emotions or other human behavior? Like, where do you?
I'm looking in mostly other directions at this point, where we're doing a little bit more of the stereotype stuff to learn how stereotypes can be used to bootstrap the process of interaction among people and robots. I also have a lot to publish on the trust side of things. The deception, the trust work was done first, but hasn't been published yet. The deception work was done after, and would like to publish more of that, and also to include emotions in this. Emotions have a profound effect on all of human-human interaction and human-robot interaction. So the question really will be there is, can a robot detect and model a person's emotions, and can a robot also have emotions itself and reflect those in its behavior so that a person anthropomorphizes that robot better and perhaps builds a better relationship or bond with it?
Has this research changed the way you interact with people? Have you taken anything to the streets, if you like, from this research? Have you implemented anything?
I'm really sorry, but like every second word is cutting out.
Yeah, what he was asking was, your research, has it led you to interact with people any different, or is there anything from your research that you've taken to the real world and said, this has changed the way that I'm interacting with people now because I've learned this?
Well, I have to admit, I have a tendency to sort of view my relationships with other people almost, I can analyze it from a theoretical standpoint now and go, I was in a really interdependent relationship there, and or my, this relationship with, a girlfriend or whatever moved from independence to dependence, or
so you find yourself running home and putting all these people on your matrix.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Do you think do you think that someday these matrix will be public? The things that you talked about, or are they actually a physical thing, or are these just kind of computational?
No, they're computational. All the work is published, and I'm currently in the process. I mean, the thing I'm trying to do right now is to produce software that'll be downloadable from my website that anyone can download and use, and to explore these algorithms for trust and deception and stereotyping and things like that. One of the things that happens to, some degree, but maybe not as much as we'd like in the human-robot interaction community, is the publication of software that people can just employ and use on their robots and see how it works. And maybe, a group improvement sort of thing could occur.
Yeah, because that would be really interesting. I mean, probably one of the most interesting parts to me is just these matrix that you talk about. I mean, stereotyping people out. Like I think what I was thinking about a podcast we did with math. This guy was a math genius from Harvard who decided to do out of all things to do. He opened up a dating website, and he produces some research based on, like, they have millions upon millions of people sign up for this website. It's okcupid.com. And when they sign up, sometimes they partake in these surveys, and they're anonymous surveys. And he's run all sorts of information from all over the world. So, take gender, race, skin color, all these things, ask them questions, break it down, and then you can say, out of 43 million people, here's a percentage of this type of classification that answered these questions this way. So this leads us to these conclusions. And it's very, very interesting, because it doesn't always have to do with dating. Their research has sometimes very little to do with dating. It has to do with a lot of other things. So, just finding that kind of research is very interesting for people who study people. Like us who do this for a living. That kind of information is very useful. So I'm just curious if, like, these kind of personality or reaction matrices will be available to say, generally, this kind of group reacts to this kind of question this way, or something to that effect.
From a data standpoint, perhaps. I mean, it could, it could be used. At this point, I don't have that kind of data with people. I've been sort of, as an academic, we're sort of limited in not only the number of people we can use, but how we can use them. So we don't have access to necessarily thousands or even dozens of people generally. But, the software will certainly be available. And, the algorithms and the software might be applicable to things like dating, in the sense that we might not necessarily predict who you'd be most compatible with, but this computational framework should be able to map out how relationships develop. So, for example, when you first meet someone, you have almost no dependence on them, but yet as a friendship builds or a romantic partner builds, the mutual interdependence becomes greater. And if you had a system that could recognize that, or even if it was a computer web diary or something like that, it might be possible to even chart your relationship with another person and say, we're headed in the direction of marriage, or we're headed in the direction of mortal enemies, or something like that.
Very, very interesting. Very interesting. Well, this is interesting stuff. So, I look forward to seeing your research that you might have coming up in the future, especially on other emotions or other aspects of human behavior, and see how they can be brought out to mathematics or algorithms. I think it does help us to understand a little deeper how people react and how maybe we can react with them. I thought that was a really interesting point you brought out about teaching the marks to be more, I hate to use the word, but more deceptive in a sense to get the deceivers on their own game. That was an interesting point.
We hopefully probably around springtime be publishing more papers, and that software should be coming up hopefully in the next couple of months, at least a preliminary version, which will then be revised. Hopefully a groundswell or a community will develop that helps create it and helps move it forward.
So if people that are listening to this want to find out more about you, where can they go? How can they get more information about you and your research?
Well, I have a website off of Georgia Tech. It's www.cc.gatech.edu / ALANWAGS, and that has my research projects, all my papers and videos and my thesis, and stuff like that.
Excellent. I will make sure that link is in the podcast notes so people can, can get to that and see if they have any.
Yeah, I just hope they don't build a model of me and then try to deceive me.
Well, have a robot answer your phone from now on. That might not be too far off in the future, huh, with some of your research coming up down the road. So just on a side note, without the research there, you really a humanoid robot. What is that like? I mean, what?
Well, it has 2 arms, 2 legs, hands, 3 fingered hands now.
Really?
It has 2 cameras, ears. It can recognize speech. It can also it has a mic, and it also can speak. It can say words, things like that. So, yeah, I'd like to get it in, one of those shell games or something where it, it hides. Maybe it's the one that hides something under one of the shells, and they get mixed around, and or perhaps it's the one who tries to pick the shells, and we'll see if it can work in that sort of deception paradigm.
That would be amazing to see, really. Huh. Well, we'll look forward to seeing some more of that. Maybe when you get that going, you'll have some pictures on your website to show us what's going on with that robot. Okay. Well, I'd like to thank you for coming on and sharing your research with us. Really interesting stuff. I really do think things like this help us to kind of get a sense of what's going on with these type of emotions or these type of things, and we can understand it more from a human standpoint, and maybe people could be protected more against this too.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. I'm sure we'll be keeping in touch, and we'll get people to your website to take a look at this, and then maybe down the road when you do more research, we can have you back on and we can talk about some of these other emotions that you'll be able to work out.
That'd be great. I look forward to it.
Thanks a lot, Alan.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, guys, another really great podcast, although this one was very deep. I think some of the stuff that Alan brought out, especially with his academic background, we really need to kind of discuss this for a few minutes and just talk about how we can apply this to ourselves as social engineers and security experts, so this makes sense for us. So I think this will be really good. I think if we can break this down, we can probably break down the algorithm that he spent forever developing into 4 different steps. At least that's what I get out of it. What do you guys think? I think maybe if we can take a few minutes to break this down into some steps, some actionable steps that we can use as social engineers, we might be able to see a little more so how this information applies to us. I don't know about you guys, but I think there's probably like 4 steps that we can break this down to, this algorithm that he had for social engineering. What do you guys think?
Sounds
break
good.
it down.
I think if you look at the 4 steps that he had there, and before we go into them, I mean, you can actually see that he had a 75% success rate at deceiving humans. So, I mean, you can definitely utilize the research that he's done, the algorithms that he's used, and probably utilize it in a method that you can successfully deceive somebody. So I think we should break down each individual one. That'd be great.
Yeah, I'd like to get it to like where it's like 100% success ratio for myself, but I guess we'll be happy with anything above 50, right?
Right. I'll take 30%. I'm good.
30%. Okay, listen, anyone who's listening to this, don't call Dave for a social engineer pen test. 30% success ratio.
I'd be pretty upset if I got a 10%, but anything above that'll be okay. I shoot low, okay? I shoot low.
Okay, so anyhow, I'm thinking, when we were talking to him, he mentioned like the first step, determining if deception is warranted. So I think from a social engineering standpoint, I mean, that's always a given. That's the goal. I mean, whether we're doing it as an auditor, for a company or a malicious social engineer, then of course the decision for that first step is always a yes. Deception is warranted. That's the goal, to get in the door and using some form of deception and doing so. So I don't think there's much there that needs to be too delved into. The depth for that is not too much.
It might not necessarily be the case every single time. You might not need to utilize deception on every single engagement that you do.
That's a good point. I mean, but I mean, how would you not? I mean, you think you would actually just utilize? I guess that's true. Yeah. Now that I'm talking about it,
there's a million different ways.
Maddie.
What? You don't use that in the States?
Yeah, we don't use it in the States. Sorry, that's
okay.
We're not doing Mossad pen test here. Okay, this is in America. Okay, in America, we're not allowed to torture people to get their server passwords. Okay.
Well, that's why security sucks.
So we need to train our admins to deal with torture. Okay, so that's, I was actually thinking, I was thinking about the story that to back up Dave's point that you tell about when you actually called the admin because he knew you were doing the pen test for him, and you convinced him to take the PDF that had some, quote unquote report in it, right?
I am so not that story. I can't believe you brought it up.
What?
I am so not proud of that story. I can't believe you brought it up.
Yeah,
we could talk about the Java exploit that you wrote the other day.
No, listen, Mutz, it fits because Dave was saying that you don't always use deception in a social engineering venue. And in that case, you really, in the end, you did deceive him. You told him the report was one thing when it's not. But you didn't use deception in your own person. You told him who you were. You didn't lie about your person.
Well, and take other examples too, where you're utilizing, piggybacking. You're not using deception in any way, shape, or form. There, you're just walking.
But you are really because in a sense, what you're lying about is that I belong here. I belong. I'm part of the employee base that belongs to walk in this door at this particular time.
I don't think that
even in that case, I thought fits with Mutz. I'm sorry.
There's no deceiving there, though. You're just walking in behind a door. I can walk behind any door I want to.
Not really. No, if the door says employees only.
Listen, I belong everywhere.
Yeah, but no, listen, you're wrong on this one. Listen, if the door says employees only, and you walk in, you have to have some form of deception because you're going to have to act like an employee, talk like an employee, look like one. You're going to want to sneak past a security guard. All of this is going to be
if they have an employee. Only sign. I'm saying the deception doesn't need to be the case when you're talking about walking into a public area, like walking into a public place like a food market, and the food market has an open network jack that you plug into, and you can hack them from there. Is that deception?
I would take that action. You got me on that. And up to that action, no, you're not deceiving anyone until somebody walks up to you, like the store manager, and says, "Hey, what are you doing?"
And I would tell him I'm a lead hacker. I had this Java exploit that I released the other day. It's the best one out there.
Dude.
And he'd believe me.
Oh, man. Okay, so you might have made your point. Maybe
that's the last time I'm going to use the Java the Java exploit.
Yeah, it's like 3 months old, so.
Yeah, I know. I killed it too much. I'm done using it. Sorry, Maddie. I'm done now.
Sorry, were you talking to me?
Oh, ouch.
No,
okay,
I was talking to...
back to the serious business at hand. I think you might have a point there, but I guess I can't think of any social engineering venue where deception would not be used, personally. That example you gave is you're walking into a store, you're plugging into a network jack. Now you're a pen tester or a hacker. You're not a social engineer.
Well,
I can't think of a social engineering venue.
Let's to our audience. Let's ask our audience some feedback, and see what they say.
Yeah, okay, that's a good debate. I think that is a good debate. We should ask the audience, is there any social engineering venue that you can think of that deception is not part of the first step of this algorithm, where deception is not warranted?
I think if you analyze this in terms of Adam's language, you'll see that by definition, social engineering engagement involves deception, at least the way he explained it biologically. Because at the end of the day, your goal will benefit you and will not necessarily benefit the target. And therefore, whatever actions you take in order to get to your goals, you are, in essence, using deception. Especially if you take it to that sort of organic aspect that Adam takes it.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Mutz. So by Alan's definition of deception, Mutz is right, that every social engineering venue does involve it because your goal is going to be adverse to the target. But I still like Dave's idea of opening up to the audience and seeing if traditional social engineering definition, if anyone could come up with a method to utilize social engineering without deception. That would be interesting.
Well, when they submit the feedback, they need to specify whether or not they're with Team Logan or Team Relic.
and everyone who's with Team Logan does not get banned from the channel.
Oh, that's messed up, dude. Come on.
Just kidding.
How about bribery?
I got a cow story. I'm just waiting to
Oh, dude. Anyhow, what were you saying, Mutz?
Bribery.
Bribery. Yeah, bribes at social-engineer.org.
No. Bribery is a method of social engineering that doesn't employ deception. Swap.
Bribery does not involve deception. Let's think about that. I guess you're right.
Hi, I'm a hacker. Take $1,000 and give me your password.
Huh. Yeah, that's a good one. But you didn't email it to contribute at social-engineer.org, so you don't get any points. Okay, now listen. Let's move on to the second point here. The second piece of the puzzle, he said you have to find out what action is available to you as a deceiver and then determine which one of those actions would be best for you or worst for you. And then on top of that, determine which action will cause your target to take the one that benefits you the most.
Now, I mean, looking at a social engineer, I mean, a lot of this would be predefined of what you've already done in your pretext, right? So you already have a decent idea of where you're going to go with it, but based off of the interactions that you have with a particular human or a particular person would trigger a certain direction that you'd go with your deception, right?
I would think so. I mean, I would think that once you do your information gathering, like, let's just use Alan for an example, even though no one do this, please. But like Alan said, he's an academic, right? So if we did all this research on him and we found out he's an academic and he has all these degrees and this is his area of research and this is what he's interested in, then my pretext would, and since I'm not as academic as him, and I wouldn't be able to maybe pretext as a professor or someone of an equal of his, my pretext would be something like a reporter or a student that wants to learn from him, and that I would want to ask him lots of questions to get information from him about himself so I can learn more.
And, you can utilize techniques like, anchoring, and planting certain things in his head and then pulling it out later on with the desired result. I mean, you can go a million different ways in that scenario. The number two one that, based off of the conversations you have with them is the one you definitely choose.
But I think where this fits in the framework, too, pretty well is elicitation. Because he's saying, you have to determine which action you take, which will cause your target to take an action that's best for you. So, like I'm thinking, for example, you walk into a building and act like you're a person in authority. That's an action. But what will be the reaction from the targets? Will they believe you? Will they not? Will you be shut down really quick? If that's the case, then that's the wrong action to take.
Yep.
Whereas if you determine to yourself, my target is the secretary or the receptionist, then what's the best action for me to take to cause her to feed back to me information that I want? Yeah, it's a much more difficult one, I think, because it involves more than just pretexting. Because pretexting,
it's all about what's going on in your environment as you're communicating with a person.
Exactly.
It could go a million different ways.
Yeah, it can. So making a matrix out of that would be, I think, very difficult a lot of times.
Well, he said a lot of the research he did too. A lot of it was self-learning, right? So it could actually learn, human conversations and deceive based off of how the code or the robot interpreted with how that conversation was going. So that's interesting because I think we do the same thing as humans, as especially as social engineers. As we, as we're talking to a person, we start to get a comfort level of which route we're going to take, and then we start learning as we're going on the fly and calculate what attack vector we're going to use when we're going after it.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I agree with that. But I think that would also take planning in some sense to know, like, if I hit A, then I'm going to use this. If I hit B, I'm going to use this.
6 lines of Python code. 6 lines of Python code. That's it.
Yeah, okay. Great. So Dave has just replaced every social engineer auditor on Earth with 6 lines of Python code. Of course, the success ratio is only 10%, so call Dave for that script.
Hey, no, it's 12%, okay? I wouldn't take 10%.
Now, let's throw this out there, though. We can talk about a lot of this, and a lot of the deep underlying concepts are really interesting. But at the same time, when you're in the middle of interaction with somebody, having the time to break that down is going to be very difficult for individuals that aren't natural with going through that process where they don't have to think about it. This is really interesting, but how do you then turn around and make this actionable when you're in the field?
That's and I think that kind of, if you ask me, Jim, that kind of leads to the third point in the algorithm, because you can't do what you just asked about the third point, which is this. He said to calculate how your action will affect the target, but the only way to do that is to develop matrices of like what he called stereotypes. Yeah, you have to have stereotypes of people. Like every time I interact with the receptionist and I approach with this pretext, this is what happens. And that's the only way that you can maybe answer your question, Jim. It's like when I'm in this situation, if I'm in the supermarket and I plug my laptop in and I'm going to use that amazing Java exploit from Mutz, and then the store manager comes up to me and says, "Hey, what are you doing?" You have to have in your matrix, here's what I'm going to say to this person in order to.
I don't think you can script out. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I agree with what Jim said. He said experience.
Yeah, I don't think you can script that out completely. I mean, there's no way that you're going to develop each and every possible scenario. I mean, it's like Jim said, it's going to 100% have to come from experience and doing it and rehearsing.
That was Mutz that actually said it, and I gave Jim all the credit. Sorry, Mutz.
I'm actually going to give Jim all the credit too. Yeah. So Jim, nice job with that. I really agree with you. And I don't know how you come up with this stuff.
It's all just years of experience.
Oh man, that was good.
I think I've laughed harder on this podcast than any other podcast.
Yeah, I think so too.
Too bad most of it's cut out.
I know. Yeah. That was the best parts of it. Trust me. You guys I wish you guys could have heard what was going on beforehand.
Hey, before I get to the fourth point, listen, here's a suggestion that came in on the podcast. Is I had a group in the channel the other day ask if we would ever consider doing a live one, like where we open up this conference line and people call in and they're able to interact with us. They interview us basically as social engineers.
You know what would be cool is to do that and then do maybe like a 24-hour one, or like a 10-hour one or a 5-hour one or something like an extended one.
What's wrong with you? What's that?
24 hours.
A 10-hour I mean, what are you talking about, Dave?
He wants to do a telethon. We'll have on, a juggler, and we'll take donations.
Dave, a 10-hour podcast? I mean, what are you thinking? Who's going to listen to a 10-hour podcast?
Trust me,
for Relic kids.
A lot of people would. And you do
a lot of people.
Do live.
Now that Relic is snipped, he has much more time on his hands.
Please, PG.
Hey, he only says sniffed. It's not a bad word.
It's the mental picture that comes with it.
You like it.
I don't. No, okay, well, listen, I don't mind the idea of a live podcast, but a 10-hour one is definitely never going to happen.
What about a 5-hour? Then a 5-hour one, okay? I'm willing to compromise.
Are you serious?
Yeah. No, I'm serious. You do back-to-back, people that, like previous guests that we've had, or, it would be kind of cool is the first hour you kind of go back and you recap everything that we've done throughout, the 15 episodes or the 20 episodes. And then the second hour.
So what you're saying is like on a sitcom, when the sitcom kind of hits a lull, they do a Where Are They Now and a lot of flashbacks and stuff like that.
I don't know why you had to go there. I mean, we're not hitting a lull, so I mean,
No, we're not. As a matter of fact, I got some solid guests coming up for the next 2 or 3 months. We're not in a lull, but I don't mind the idea of a live podcast, but it will be a normal length. We've been doing them like an hour and a half, hour and 45.
See, I think we should keep asking our audience. I mean, do they want a 5-hour podcast?
Okay, but here's the deal. Even if they say yes, you really want to be on the phone for 5 hours answering questions?
This sounds like a DEF CON contest.
Yeah, right. This does sound like it. You know what we'll do? We'll set up a podcast for 5 hours, Dave. You can run it. You can be on for 5 hours, and then we'll archive it.
What am I going to talk about for 5 hours?
Exactly my point.
Well, no, I mean, if it's with all of you guys, I mean, it kind of helps out, you know. I mean, you know, we can sit there and just joke around with each other, but, you know, me, I'm not that interesting for 5 hours. I mean,
you're not that interesting for 20 minutes, man. So
I could probably do about, you know, 2.5 hours, but 5 is kind of a little close.
Dude, you can do like 2.5 minutes.
Oh, come on, Chris. Just because you had a little incident doesn't mean you need to get all mean.
Anyhow, on to the fourth action point, or the fourth point. The final point he brought out in the algorithm was to actually then take the action. So to me, that's kind of as simple as the primary piece. So after you determine if deception is warranted, you find out the action that you can take that will be the best for you. You calculate how your action will affect the target. You create the stereotypes in doing so, and then you take the action. And that is basically algorithm for deception. It's kind of ridiculous if you ask me.
So we should be able to shrink wrap this and package it into like a box?
We should. I mean, to me, this is pretty interesting stuff, because if you can, outline exactly what deception is, or other things, like he said he's working on one for trust. If you can understand these in a more, I think, linear way, then it's easier to notice it. But when I was saying that, I guess what was hitting me in the head was his suggestion about not trying to train people to be masters at noticing deception, but train the employees to actually become deceivers, so that they don't become part of the stereotype matrices of the deceivers themselves. I mean,
I don't know. I don't know that would be easier.
You don't think that would be easier?
I'm thinking of a call center. Think about what we experienced at the CTF.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, these individuals that are in a call center, they're not being trained with traditional security awareness stuff. In many cases, how it is, and in most cases, the traditional way of doing that is a little video that they sit and watch, and then maybe they answer 3 or 4 questions at the end of it and say done. And it takes 30 minutes, 40 minutes, something like that. To take those people and tell them, hey, look, what you need to do is find innocuous ways of deceiving people. I can't see that occurring in that environment at all. I don't think that's helpful.
I wasn't thinking so much about teaching the people how to think like a deceiver, or like what you said, but in the sense of teaching them not to fall into the standard scripts that the social engineers, the malicious social engineers, are looking for, that make them easier to deceive. Like we knew.
But then that would make every employee in your company a master social engineer that not only knows social engineering techniques, but also knows how to fend from them. That's a bit utopic, if you ask me.
Yeah, you're right. It is a bit utopic.
On top of that, if you think about from a product consistency basis, that just wouldn't work for a company. You'd have every employee behaving in a different manner. The companies don't want that. They want these employees to be generally, faceless and with no personality, so that when you call back and you get employee A, it's the exact same experience as if you call up and get employee C. Yeah,
I'm with you. And what should we give Jim the credit for what Mutt said before again?
Yeah, absolutely, no question about it.
Yeah.
No,
so for what you said, Jim, it makes sense. I mean, and what Mutt said, I think that is a little utopic. I mean, it sounds good on paper, teaching the employees to not fall into the standard scripts, but yeah, in reality, I think if you tie what Mutt said in with what you said at the end, that makes sense. I mean, the companies still have to. I think one of the things we determined from the CTF that really hit home with a lot of the companies we spoke to is you have to be able to give out information. Information release is part of life and business in the world. So it's not that we're telling people don't give out information, don't do that, but we're telling people to be more thoughtful about the information they give out. And,
is it safe to say that we're still a little ways off from social engineering robots?
I don't know. I guess. I mean, I don't know. I guess we'll have to see what they can do. I mean, he said one of the tests they wanted to do with the humanoid robot was to have it run one of those shell tests, where they have like a marble under the shell, and it tries to move it around fast enough that a person can't pick out where the shell is.
for sure is I've stopped trusting online poker.
Yeah, I know. He said that they're using these algorithms on online poker. That's interesting, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it'd be interesting to see if I can get one of these robots to kind of do a couple social engineers for me. I mean, just so I can take a nap or something.
Not only that, but you might get above 12%.
Hey, that was a low blow. That was a low blow. I don't know why you had to go there. You have a couple cow incidents, and then something like that happens.
Oh man. Well, I think you guys are killing me. I tell you, you guys are killing me. I think
Wait.
Yes.
Why don't you talk about your cow incident?
No, because we're ending the podcast.
What a great way to end the podcast.
Before we end the podcast,
first of all,
we've been on the phone for almost 2.5 hours. That's half of a 5-hour podcast.
Say, if I ever do give a speech publicly at a con, I am not telling you.
I'm not going to find out about it. I mean, seriously.
You will, but I'm going to make sure you don't find out until there's no time to plan something.
Trust me. I already have it planned. It's just the only problem is floor specs. I just have to redesign it based on floor specs. So regardless, I still have something.
Floor specs? I mean, seriously?
Dude, I have blueprint diagrams and everything now. I'm not joking.
Oh, come on.
I'm not even joking.
Seriously?
I spent about 3 weeks with Visio diagrams and process flows and blueprints. So basically, it's a it basically can't fail. There's about 60 different elements to it that if one component fails, there's still another 59 to go. So
I wish we could include this in the actual podcast because people would find this hilarious.
So yeah, it'll be one of those ones where it'll last for centuries, and people will be hearing about that in the history books.
I'm not gonna get physically harmed, am I?
No. Maybe not. Probably not. No, you're fine.
Nothing compared to the mental damage, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's all mental, man. That's it. It's just it'll definitely screw your mind for about 6 months to a year. But
now listen, you got to understand something. There's a good chance that my family, my kids, will be there.
Yeah, listen. That means I only have 59 more avenues. So don't worry.
Okay, see, because I could, you got to think the worst prank that you had pulled on you, and I'm not talking about the schmoocon with the schmucks. Okay, I'm talking about from us, from your friends. Whereas a bunch of lemons pelting you in the head.
Right. No.
And Mr. X hitting you with a snowball.
You have nothing to worry about when it comes to stuff like that. It'll be very tasteful in nature. It's something that if your family's there, it'll be fine.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
see, I just had this vision of
No.
I don't know. I
may talk a lot about that stuff, but I would never do it to you.
Okay. I still,
Don't get me wrong. What I'm going to do to you is going to be absolutely horrendous, but it's not going to involve sexual things.
Oh, well, I feel so much better.
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, see? No problem.
Oh, my gosh. I honestly thought that up to this point that if I did get a speech at one of the cons, I would be able to trust Jim and tell him, to get his help with the speech, like as a confidant. But there's absolutely no way I can trust Jim. If it were to happen, there's no way I can trust Jim because he would run right to you and tell you guys.
Yeah, less work for me then.
Oh, man. And I definitely can't trust much.
You're
what was that?
Alone.
I'm all alone.
All alone.
I am. I'm alone.
And you probably can't trust your wife either. She would definitely tell me.
No.
Yeah, she would. Trust me.
No. My wife doesn't even like you.
Yeah, she does.
Yeah, she does. Okay, so anyway, breaking it down into these 4 points, I think really helps to see how we might be able to use some of this academic research as social engineers. I'm looking forward to seeing how he does this with trust or maybe some other aspects of human emotion that might help us to see how we can utilize these kind of algorithms for understanding more interaction with people. So it'll be pretty interesting to see what comes out of it in the future. And I like it.
Indeed.
I think Dave, you're onto something with this idea about getting audience interaction. I think if we just choose one, your idea about the first step that to determine if deception is warranted, and I say that social engineering always involves deception, and you say it doesn't. You know what I'm going to do? I think I'm going to set up a poll page, and I'll tweet the link when this podcast comes out, and then we'll see what we get as far as our listeners if they come to the poll page and let us know what they think, and then we'll do more of that in the future podcast. That would be pretty cool, huh?
Yeah, it sounds like a great idea. I'm glad Jim thought of it.
So am I, really. You know.
It's all the experience.
Oh, poor Mutz. I'm sorry, Mutz. I really am.
That's all right.
Back when I took the initiative in creating the Internet.
Yeah, I know. And you also got your election stole from you. Yeah.
Oh, okay, guys. Well, this has been another great podcast. I appreciate all the feedback and the nice discussion at the end. I think this will bring back, well, not that we lost any, but it will make some of the listeners real happy because a lot of people said they missed some of this interaction at the end. So it's nice to chat with you guys and talk about how we can apply this to our field.
And I would say, listen, I mean, we're always looking for feedback. So if you have any ideas on improving the podcast or you have something that we missed that you want to add to it, I mean, contact us. And we're more than happy to incorporate it into the podcast.
Or suggestions.
Yeah, well, shut the hell up and leave us alone.
So don't send it to mutz@social-engineer.org because you just get that response.
Yeah.
But send it to contribute.
Yeah. Seriously. And guys, stop asking us to get rid of Dave. We're just not going to do it.
I know, come on. I mean, I thought after the first like 5 or 10 was a joke, but then you get like 300 or 400 of them. I mean, it just kind of piles on you.
300 or 400. Try 3,000 or 4,000.
Oh, I thought it was. You told me it was only 300 or 400.
Yeah, I know. I didn't want to hurt your feelings, but.
Oh man, I'm hurt now.
Anyhow, if you guys like the outro music, check it out at dualcoremusic.com.
And there's 2 of them. 2
of them, Int 80 and C64. So we know that. We realize that.
They're musicians.
We knew it. They're musicians. Great. Thanks, Jim. You're really adding to the credence that we know what we're talking about.
Yes.
They play music. If you want to check us out on the internet that Jim created, he just took credit for that a little while ago. It's www.social-engineer.org or on the IRC network, freenode.net. We're on channel social-engineer. You can also just type in seorg.org, and that brings you right to our website. On Twitter, we're Human Hacker, and we'll look forward to talking to you all next month. See you then.
Hey, Chris?
Yeah.
What's your plan?
I'll try my best to get you. I'm gonna use every trick in the book. I'll try my best to get you hooked. I'm gonna use every trick in the book. I'll try my best to get you.
It's the SE derivative. That's me, I'm prime. The last thing I want is suspicion of a crime. My positive demeanor and my smile make it fine. With eye contact for the right amount of time. Too much and not enough doesn't seem for real. Got a nice firm handshake sealing the deal. Know a little about a lot and a lot about a little. So most conversations put me somewhere in the middle. My pop culture knowledge leaves me feeling kind of scary. It lets me chat with working class and gossip secretaries. Recon the boardroom, looking for the top thing. Loosen up execs when I ask about the golf swing. Start spewing secrets, just like a torrent. Can't really blame them, we all want to feel important. It might seem different from what you were envisioning. The key to communicate, it's all about the listening.
Every trick in the book, I'll try my best to get you hooked. I'm gonna use every trick in the book, I'll try my best to get you. I'm gonna use every trick in the book, I'll try my best to get you hooked. I'm gonna use every trick in the book, I'll try my best to get you.
Offering support to employees is the best. When I'm calling random users and claiming I'm a tech, he's just here to help. So they're easily believing him. Jamming, planning, scamming, spanning every single medium. Recording while I'm spidering your phone menu system. The mirror it and use it for my own acquisition. Get them on the line, I just do a little switching. Sending out my number in the message when I'm fishing. 6 billion people, it's really quite a market. Customers, employees, everyone's a target. Backing up my claims, using all the common slang. Lingo for the layout, drop the manager's name. Collecting all the sweet stuff like honey to a bumblebee. Like every unlisted number dialed to your company. You saw me, you probably think I'm clumsy, but I'm not. Cause I'm dropping all these USB drives around the parking lot.
Whoops.
trick in the book. I'll try my best to get you hooked. I'm gonna use every trick in the book. I'll try my best to get you. I'm gonna use every trick in the book. I'll try my best to get you hooked. I'm gonna use every trick in the book. I'll try my best to get you.